I think what we'll do now is move on and hear one more case study. Douglas Clark at University of Saskatchewan with lessons from the Yukon case study.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you in advance, and I look forward to talking about this shortly. What I'd like to present on today is an outline and some of the process that I see for moving forward with a very interesting case study, Transformations in Wildlife and Subsistence Systems in the Southwest Yukon in northwestern Canada. This is an area where I've been working for about 12 years, both in my previous career with Parks Canada and also as a researcher. I'm also really pleased to let you know that as of Friday, I have a co-author on this report, Linnea Workman, the Renewable Resources Manager for the Champagne and Asiac First Nation. Linnea and I have worked together for a number of years on many projects, and I think she'll bring a great deal to this. The region is an area where human habitation has gone back at least 8,500 years relatively continuously. And it's also an area where during that time profound biophysical changes have occurred on a very regular basis. And of real note, these sorts of changes are neither new but to people or to the landscape, but they continue, and the changes are so abrupt and rapid that they're readily visible well within the span of a human lifespan, or even in the span of just the decade and a little bit that I've been working up there. This slide shows the highway down to Haines, Alaska, with Kluane National Park in the background. The trees in the middle ground before the 1990s were not reddish-gray. That's the aftermath of a spruce beetle outbreak that came through the area in the 1990s, part of the same outbreak complex that hit Alaska at the same time. It killed 60% of the forests in Kluane National Park and a comparable portion in some very, very large regions outside. The outbreak appears to have slowed. Many competing reasons why. One of the big drivers is believed to be the fact that this area has experienced about 1 degree per decade warming over the last four decades. So very, very rapid warming climate regionally and quite profound biophysical impacts. It's an area where glaciers move so fast that Aboriginal people do consider them living beings. And in the park in the 1980s, there was one episode where a glacier advanced 9 kilometers within one summer. They're called galloping glaciers up here. And they're just one more manifestation of the type of rapid change that is just part of the system in this region. It's an area where we've also seen fairly profound changes in governance and politics over the last few decades. With the settlement of comprehensive Aboriginal land claims in the early 1990s, we see not only Aboriginal self-governments coming into being, but also co-management institutions for renewable resources, for the national park. And these have profoundly changed the political landscape. Importantly, in the Yukon, these involve not just Aboriginal people, but local non-Aboriginal people as well. This is also a region where there is a considerable history of scientific research which is ongoing. The Arctic Institute has its Kluane Lake Research Station here, which recently underwent a major upgrade and is one of the nodes of long-term research in northern Canada. There have been a few synthesis works over the years, and there's an awful lot to draw on in terms of documented knowledge and history from the scientific community in this region, as well, of course, from many, many other sources. My work over the last 6 years in this region has involved a relatively well, in some senses a very new species to the landscape, and in some senses a very old species. Wood bison had been native to the Yukon for an extremely long period of time, disappearing around the end of the 19th century, roughly the same time they disappeared in Alaska. They were reintroduced in the late 1980s, just prior to the settlement of Aboriginal land claims. Their population has grown extremely rapidly, and this abrupt biophysical change coupled with the brand new governance regimes, has created a very, very interesting situation. So I've been working with Champagne-Anahuac First Nation and particularly with Linnea for quite some time to look at the impacts of bison on First Nation people and their livelihoods in this region, and that has led to a research project that we're working together on that's ongoing with a graduate student of mine, seen in the upper right, Dylan Beach, looking at scenario planning for managing bison and several other new ungulate species in the region, elk and mule deer. This is an area where up until the 1930s, Aboriginal peoples were heavily dependent on migratory barren ground caribou. Actually, migratory caribou, I should probably be careful about calling them barren grounders, but they were big migratory herds. They disappeared abruptly in the late 1930s, followed by a couple of years of what's I understand was quite severe hardship for people, and then they were replaced by moose as moose moved into the region, and that brought adaptation in the form of a whole new seasonal round for Aboriginal people in the southwest Yukon. The moose population began to decline in the 1970s and 80s, along with other changes on the landscape and in communities and in their layout and demographics. And we are now seeing a transition. It's widely felt we're seeing a transition from moose being the most dominant subsistence species to not being fully replaced by bison, but having a new suite of subsistence species. The goals for managing these species on the landscape really aren't clear, and that's what our research project is trying to see what can be done to give local co-management participants tools to elucidate some of those goals for themselves, and it's proving to be an absolutely fascinating project. So pulling all this together into a case study, just to cover the process that I would see, the goal of this case study would be to look at these recent transitions in subsistence systems and look at how people have coped, what attributes of resilience, adaptive capacity, and transformative capacity there may very well be. And there has been some very interesting recent work done by Lisa Christensen and Naomi Krogman in this region on indigenous perceptions of resilience and on their own resilience that I really hope to integrate and draw on as well. So to do that, what we first see as the first step, really simply go through the literature and the documented information that's available on recent subsistence transformations, the ones we've seen in the past, which is still just within the threshold of living memory, and the transitions that appear to be ongoing right now. Stage 2 would involve more detailed investigation of existing data sources about resilience, adaptation, and transformation. This would involve more than simply looking at the literature and available documentation. And I should note that once we get past stage 1, simply reviewing literature and publicly available documents, if we start looking in greater detail at past interview and project data collected by either myself working with Champagne-Anahuac or by Champagne-Anahuac First Nations themselves, what we would need to do would be to negotiate a research agreement with that First Nation. They're quite used to doing this and quite good at it, and I have considerable faith that would not be an overly difficult or onerous task, but out of respect for them and their policies and laws on how they use traditional knowledge, that's a piece that simply has to be there. Stage 3, if we are able to get to this point, it would be to validate our provisional conclusions with community members through either a workshop or some form of other participatory process. Stages 2 and 3, I think, offer a really interesting opportunity for local capacity building efforts. In other words, bringing on and involving local people actively in helping prepare this case study and contribute to the Arctic Resilience Report. And if we design this process as such, I think that'll make it the kind of project that will be seen as relevant and beneficial to communities in the Yukon. And if it's not seen as such, quite frankly, they won't be particularly interested in it or its recommendations. And just on that, it really is critical to work with community members. And for those of you that have not been working in the Canadian context in recent years, the norms and expectations and practices that have developed are for a very, very high degree of involvement right from the very early stages. There have been some excellent projects conducted in the Yukon and elsewhere that have really blazed this particular trail and developed these norms and practices. So we're not going blind into this. We have some good experience to draw on, and folks in the Southwest Yukon, local residents, scientists, First Nation community members, they're all pretty used to working together with one another by now, and they're actually rather good at it, which has been one thing I've learned a great deal about working with folks up there over the years. So we have, I believe we have a very interesting situation and a fair number of very willing partners, and an awful lot of information that we should be able to pull together for synthesis. So that's the case. That's where it's at, and I'd be pleased, assuming that the Skype works in a few minutes, to respond to any questions.